This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Starting today's show is Tyler Cozzens, Director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center, with a cattle market update. He talks about hay and corn inputs and retail prices. A discussion about the different classes of driver's license with Nick Wright, a trooper with the Kansas Highway Patrol, keeps today's show rolling. The show wraps with another segment of Faces in Agriculture. We are joined by Sara Olberding, who is involved in agriculture in Dickinson County, to talk about her business, Ren Fields. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Monday show with the cattle market update from Director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center, Tyler Cozzens. Tyler, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Tyler, what did we see in the cattle market this past week?
Yeah, so kind of looking at some of the prices and recapping some of the how things transpired over the last week. Definitely seeing stronger prices than what we saw compared to a year ago, especially. Kind of breaking some things down there on the feeder steer side of things. 4 to 5 weights were actually $4.30 last week. That's actually up $76, almost $77 from a year ago. 5 to 6 weights were $3.83. That's up about $49. 6 to 7 weights were $3.31. That's up almost $52 from a year ago. 7 to 8 weights were $2.96. That's up $35. 8 to 9 weights were $2.77. Up about $41 there. And then those 900 to 1,000 pound feeder steers were $2.61. That's up about $46 from a year ago. Now on the feeder heifer side of things, those 4 to 5 weights were $4.12. That's actually up quite a bit from a year ago, over $1. 5 to 6 weights were $3.18. That's up $32. 6 to 7 weights were $2.86. Up about $21, almost $22 from a year ago. 7 to 8 weights were $2.76. 8 to 9 weights were $2.53. That's up about $38. And then those 900 to 1,000 pound feeder heifers were up about $34 to $2.37. Now we kind of look at the fed cattle side of things. 5 steers on a live basis. Steers and heifers were actually about $185, almost $186 last year. And compared to that to this week, they're actually up over $2.10. Actually, live steers were $2.11. So that's actually up about 14% from a year ago, about $25 per hundredweight there on those on a live basis. On a dress basis, last week they were $3.36 for both steers and heifers. That's up about $39, almost $40 compared to a year ago, about 13%. So still some pretty big gains compared to a year ago, and still seeing a strong upward trend in overall fed steer and heifer prices. So definitely some stronger strength there. And watching that market moving forward here is definitely going to be key for the cattle sector. Now, looking a little bit more on the wholesale side of things, that box beef cutout value last week averaged about $3. Last year and this week was actually $3.37, so definitely a gain of about $37 compared to a year ago. The stronger performers in the cutout value have been the rib, the round, and the loin, which we would kind of expect as we kind of are leading up to Memorial Day just coming around the corner here. We've got Easter coming up in a couple weeks here. So definitely some of that demand season there starting to kick in and seeing a little bit more demand pull for some of those cuts coming through the market there. Still seeing some gains there on the chuck and the brisket and flank. Short plate's the only one that's really seeing a little bit of weakness there, but by and large still seeing some pretty strong gains there as far as the cutout value goes. And definitely something to keep in mind as we get much closer to the kind of the start of the unofficial start of the summer grilling season and see how this cutout value holds up.
As we're thinking about our cattle producers also, what are we seeing for feed costs?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of one of these things that's always kind of important to keep our eye on. It's just kind of the input cost side of things, specifically feed costs. A few of the talks I've been giving here over the last few weeks and months is just kind of watching some of that information there. And, obviously one of those things we're always watching as far as inputs is on the hay side of things. We kind of get a couple of pieces of information as far as just overall supply availability of hay within the supply chain there, and that's December 1 and May 1 hay stocks. So obviously May 1 is coming up here pretty soon. But obviously that December 1 hay stocks number has been trending up here the last couple of years. So watching that May 1 hay stocks number, see how those supplies fared over the winter, if today producers had to feed a little bit more hay to kind of supplement maybe just overall feed and range availability for those cattle. So one of those things to look at there. Drought has definitely been one of those pictures we're watching here. USDA's World Board currently has about 39% of the major hay producing regions of the U.S. falling under an area that is experiencing drought. So definitely a larger proportion of hay producing acres within the U.S. experiencing some of that drought. And as we get through spring here, we can definitely see some of that picture turn if we get some needed moisture. But if we don't see that happen, then we could start to see maybe some potential impacts on the supply side to specifically hay availability as we kind of go through the summer months here. So definitely one of those things to keep an ay on. But if we kind of look at some of the price side of things on hay, we've definitely been seeing a downward trend for hay prices over the last couple of years. So we've seen hay prices get the lowest in about 3 to almost 4 years, kind of sitting around that $150 per ton nationally, that price there. So definitely well below some of those prices that we were seeing, even a couple of years ago that were around $200 or more per ton. So kind of another thing to look at on the feed input cost side of things is corn. Recent projections from USDA actually has over 95 million acres of corn to be planted this next crop season. That's up about 5 million acres from the 90.6 million acres that was planted last year. So definitely a big jump in the corn side of things. So obviously if you kind of keep a trend line yield there, we'll definitely see a little bit more corn out there as far as supplies go. And so currently they're projecting those acres to be higher. So we currently have prices that are actually sitting just below $5 per bushel, definitely lower than what we've seen in the last couple of years, kind of in line with what we saw last year. But obviously there's still a lot of the growing season ahead, many factors that are still at play that will likely influence just overall corn acres planted and also this corn price. But I think, keeping the corn and hay prices in mind and be a few of those key factors to watch over the next coming months here as far as feed cost side of the equation goes for these livestock producers.
And Tyler, a report that came out last week involved retail prices, and what were some prices we saw when it comes to beef and pork?
Yeah, so, this is kind of one of those monthly pieces of information that we get, and I've been watching this pretty closely here because these prices have definitely been showing signs of trending higher as far as retail beef and pork prices go. And so by and large, across the board, consumers are seeing those higher retail prices in the meat case there. So definitely something that we're watching. And so specifically to talk about a few of these prices on the beef side, the all fresh retail beef price, it actually reached a new record of $8.42 per pound in March. That's actually up almost 7%, over 50 cents per pound from the prior year. And I think some of the noteworthy things to pull out from that, kind of an aggregate retail beef price of over $8, reaching a record there. But we're also seeing, a record ground beef price. It actually surpassed $6 per pound and hit $6.14 per pound in March. That's actually up 11%, over 60 cents per pound from last year. Right. So when we look at that ground beef price, obviously we're looking at the 90% lean and 50% lean price to kind of get our different mixes as far as the ground beef goes within the retail meat case there. And the bigger driver of that ground beef price has actually been that 90% lean beef price. It's actually been sitting around $3.80 per pound for a few weeks here. And we compare that to a year ago at this time, it was sitting at about $3.45 per pound. Now, 50% lean beef prices has been tracking a little bit above a year ago, about $110 to $120 per pound for several weeks now, but definitely tracking a little bit sideways there. But, as we're watching both of these prices, specifically on this ground beef side of things, as we're seeing these 90s and leans track a little bit higher than they were a year ago, definitely signaling that this ground beef price will probably remain around $6 per pound here in the near term. And so watching that quite closely because we haven't really started to hit the peak grilling summer season here. A couple other things to note on the beef side. Roast hit $7.99 per pound in March. That's the second highest. That's only behind the $8 per pound mark record that was actually reached just last month in February. So compared to a year ago, that's actually up 8% or about 60 cents per pound from last year. Steaks were $11.92 per pound. That's an increase of 3% or about 40 cents per pound from the same time last year. Now, looking on the pork side of things, retail pork prices hit $4.95 per pound in March. So we're near the same highs that were reached in September. We're reaching that $5 mark. And last time we kind of hit that $5 mark was September of 22, October of 2022, and October of 2023, when they actually reached just about $5 or just above $5 per pound. So definitely a stronger retail price there for the pork side of things. And a lot of this increase in the retail pork prices is we're seeing higher bacon prices. They're actually just below that $7 mark. We're actually $6.98 per pound in March. That's actually an increase of almost 6%, or about 37 cents per pound from last year. Also noteworthy in March, retail prices for chops and hams increased from last year about 2% and just under 1% respectively to $4.34 and $4.50 per pound.
As we're thinking about these different prices, any concerns about the connection they're going to have with consumers or how they might impact them?
Yeah, so by and large, I mean, one of the bigger things we've been watching here and kind of watching these retail prices, just the overall potential impacts to just consumer demand for specifically meat in the retail case, in the meat case there. So we're kind of this larger concern on the retail price side of things would be inflationary pressures and how that will affect consumer demand. Now, on the meat demand side of things, we've seen consumers actively continue to purchase meat. That's definitely what we saw in 2024 and somewhat through the first quarter of 2025. But we see these prices move a little bit higher. So that looming concern regarding meat demand is if we are approaching that point where consumers will start to limit their meat consumption due to higher prices, and we start to then see some of those demand impacts on just overall demand for meat in the meat case.
Tyler, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That was Director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center, Tyler Cozzens. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Monday show talking about classes of driver's license with a trooper with the Kansas Highway Patrol, Nick Wright. Nick, thanks for joining us today.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Nick, as we're talking through these different licenses, are all licenses the same across the country, or are they state-specific?
That depends on if we're talking about a commercial driver's license or a non-commercial. A commercial driver's license will be the same classes, A, B, and C, across all of the United States. Canada and Mexico are a little bit different, but non-commercial driver's licenses, those vary by state on what letters they use as far as their classes and what they even mean.
And when we're thinking about driver's license for farmers and ranchers here in Kansas, are they usually dealing with commercial or non-commercial licenses?
Well, our statute accepts out farmers if they're an intrastate farmer, meaning they're within the state of Kansas, from the CDL requirements, as long as they're driving a farm-registered truck or truck tractor. And then we also actually give them 150 air miles from their farm outside of the state. So for the most part, though, if they're within Kansas, they do not need the commercial driver's license.
So as we're talking today, wanting to talk through those non-commercial driver's license, starting with Class C, and what's Class C?
So your Class C is just your regular driver's license. You can't drive anything over 26,000 pounds. Of course, we're going to talk about the farmer thing here a little bit in that, because there is some exceptions for that. But that's your typical license that you get when you turn 16 years old. You're not driving a tractor trailer. You're just driving a car around town. That's your Class C driver's license.
What are they allowed to drive and not allowed to drive with a Class C license?
Okay, so this is where it can get a little bit tricky, and you have to understand the terminology. So in our exceptions to driver's license classes, we know that a Class A combination vehicle means that the combination itself has a gross vehicle weight rating of over 26,000 pounds, and the towed unit, or the trailer, is over 10,000 pounds. So just think over 26 with a trailer over 10. That would normally be a Class A combination. Now, if that is a truck and a trailer, if they're a farm-registered truck, then they don't have to have the Class A. The regular Class C is just fine because it's a farm exception. Now, if the power unit, instead of being a truck, is a truck tractor, what most people would call a semi-truck sometimes, that is a truck tractor by definition. And so if it's a Class A combination, then they're going to have what is the non-commercial Class A. So it's still over 26, trailer over 10. All you have to do to go get it is you have to go take a written test again, and then you take a road test. There's no backing. There's no skills. It's basically just to make sure that you know how to control the vehicle. You're not going to hit all the curbs going around the corner and things like that.
So for that Class A license, important for both livestock haulers and grain haulers?
Yes. And again, that's if they have the farm tag on it. If they don't have the farm tag, they're not going to get those exceptions. But we're assuming that most people are probably going to have the farm tag on their truck tractor. So, but again, if it's a truck, like think of a grain truck that happens to be pulling a trailer and they're over 26 with a trailer over 10, since it's a truck by definition, then they don't have to have that commercial or non-commercial Class A. They would just need a regular Class C driver's license.
What is Class B then?
So a Class B is a single unit that's over 26,000 pounds. So think like a grain truck. But again, if they have a farm tag on that truck, since it's a truck by definition, meaning it hauls cargo and doesn't just pull another vehicle, then that says the state says, you know what, that's okay. You don't need the Class B. All you need is a regular Class C. But again, the key point there is you have to have a farm tag to get out of those Class A and Class B classes.
And one more class, which probably farmers aren't using for their everyday operations, Class M. And what is Class M?
A Class M is a motorcycle license. A lot of people will say it's a motorcycle endorsement. It actually is. It's a separate class here in Kansas. So if you're going to ride a motorcycle, you need to have a Class M driver's license. But I don't suppose too many farmers are riding motorcycles to the co-op.
And Nick, you mentioned that not all non-commercial licenses are the same between different states. And so if someone with a non-commercial license is going 50 miles into Missouri, do they need to worry about it?
Well, if they're a Kansas resident, then they're going to just be required to get whatever license we require. We have reciprocity with the states, just the same as if a Missouri resident comes into Kansas. We're going to honor whatever their Missouri driver's license is, because for Missouri, for example, they don't have those non-commercial Class A, B, and C like we do. They have an E and an F, actually, and so they can drive a tractor trailer on a Missouri Class F, which is kind of weird, but we have that reciprocity with the state. So whatever state you're licensed in, it's what you're going to have to comply with.
When do we see farmers and ranchers maybe needing that commercial license or that CDL?
That's when they are no longer meeting that exception, where maybe they're hauling the grain for somebody else. They're now a for-hire operation. They're working for a company as opposed to just hauling their own products, their own machinery, ag products, things like that. But once you become a for-hire carrier, a common carrier it's sometimes called, now you're going to need to have that commercial driver's license.
And what's the process of the commercial driver's license?
That gets a little trickier. So a couple years ago, we added in a thing, well, not we, the federal government added in a thing called entry-level driver training. So there's three parts to that. There's classroom training, there's range time, which is practicing your skills, then there's behind the wheel time. So they have to do that entry-level driver training first, then they have to go take all their written tests. You're going to have to take the air brake test, the combination vehicle, all that, for whatever class license you're wanting to get. And then you have to go take the test at the DMV, unless you've gone to a truck driving school, or some of those they will test the drivers right there. But once you get to the DMV, you're going to have to do the skills test. You're going to have to do the backing and those sort of things. You're going to have to do the pre-trip inspection, which is quite a bit of information. And then you go out on the road. If you pass all that, then they grant you that commercial driver's license. How
are the commercial classes broken down?
The commercial, fortunately, they are just the same as our non-commercial in Kansas. So the commercial classes across the country are just A, B, and C. So again, over 26 with a trailer over 10, over 26 for a Class B, and then a Class C. We call it people and placards. If it's a bus that's designed for 16 or more passengers, including the driver, or if you haul hazmat that requires placards and it doesn't already meet a Class A or B, then you'd have to have that Class C CDL.
What's a common mistake you see when farmers and ranchers are moving across the state?
I would say as far as the driver's license goes is they have the wrong license. And I'm not saying we're out here to write a whole bunch of farmers' tickets. A lot of times it's just an educational thing. But if we stop somebody in a truck tractor semi-trailer that has that farm tag and they don't have that non-commercial Class A, then they do need to get that. So they're really operating without a driver's license. That's a pretty common thing. So, and of course, another thing is not wearing their seatbelts. We still see that. I know in the agricultural community, a lot of guys don't like to wear their seatbelts, but we're big advocates of seatbelts and keeping people inside that vehicle in the event of a crash and keeping you in the driver's seat.
Are there some safety things when we're talking about trucks and truck tractors that you'd like to remind our farmers and ranchers about?
Just remember that you're still responsible for everything in and on your truck. Make sure that your lights are working. Make sure your tires look okay. That truck could have been sitting in a field for 6 months, and those tires could be flat or dry rotted or no tread left on them. So just make sure you're aware of those things. Make sure you're not overloading Look at suspension, things like that, cracked leaf springs. We see a lot of damage to vehicles by being overloaded also. So just be aware of all those things. Kind of give your truck a walk around before you head out and make sure it's okay, because it's your livelihood. And I always tell people, secure the cargo on your vehicle like your family's driving behind it.
Nick, backtracking a little bit and wanting to talk on farmers permits and what other qualifications someone needs to have to be able to obtain one.
Well, you have to be 14 years of age. You have to either live on a farm that has 20 acres that's used for agricultural operations, or you have to be employed for compensation on a farm. And if you're one of those things, then you can get a farm permit at 14, and those drivers can start driving and helping out around the farm.
Nick, for people who want to find out more information or maybe have a few questions, what are your recommendations to get those answered?
There's a lot of resources out there. I'm a big advocate of getting people the right answer and showing them in black and white why it is what it is. So I would direct them to our website, which is KansasHighwayPatrol.gov. When you click on the main page, if you scroll down just a little bit under popular links, you'll see a button that says commercial vehicles. You click on that, that'll take you to our page. Has a bunch of frequently asked questions. My contact information is on there. I'd be glad to answer questions. Email or phone is fine. We have an office in Topeka that is staffed normal business hours. You can always leave a message, though, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. They have a lot of good people in that office, too, that can also help answer your questions.
As we round out today's segment, Nick, what's your final reminder for farmers and ranchers when it comes to hauling down the road?
Just be careful. Be cognizant of other traffic. You know that other drivers are not going to be paying attention as well as you probably are, so just be defensive and wear that seatbelt.
Nick, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
That was a trooper with the Kansas Highway Patrol, Nick Wright. If you're looking to find more information on this topic, you can go to the Kansas Highway Patrol's website. As Nick mentioned, it is KansasHighwayPatrol.gov. Again, that is KansasHighwayPatrol.gov. He recommends taking the time to scroll down and click on commercial vehicles. If you're wanting to find more information about farmers permits, you can go to the website www.ktsro.org/teen. Again, that is www.ktsro.org/TEEN. I will link both of these websites in today's show notes on agtoday.net. Before we cut to a break, I would like to remind you about the upcoming Beef Quality Assurance Training with K-State Extension Beef Veterinarian A.J. Tarpoff. This one is taking place Tuesday, April 22nd at the KSU Research Station in Garden City. They ask that you RSVP by April 15th. To do that, you can email kbc@kansasbeef.org or call 785-273-5225. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Monday show with another segment of Faces in Agriculture. And this week we're joined by someone involved in agriculture in Dickinson County, Sara Olberding. Sara, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby, for having me.
Sara, can you tell us a little bit about your business?
Yeah, my business is Ren Fields, and it's a cut flower farm. I'm going into my fourth season, and I started it back during COVID days. And so the reason I started it is because I feel like it's important to bring flowers that you may only see at a special occasion or at a celebration of life. I think flowers should be celebrated every day. And I wanted to bring those specialty flowers to our local market and enjoyed doing that.
What have been some things that have been really important to having a successful cut flower business?
One of the key things is just really understanding the market and knowing what people want and understanding that and making those changes, shifting as needed, and then adding things as needed.
Are there any things that you've done within your 4 years of having Ren Fields that have kind of surprised you with what customers are wanting?
It is interesting. I mean, the key season is, of course, spring. There's a high demand there. We're tired of the cold winter and ready to have some color in our lives. And it's been difficult to program the flowers so that they're ready that early, because most of the flowers and seeds that I'm starting those around Valentine's Day or a little bit before. So timing is always a challenge. And along with that timing is, of course, weather conditions.
What have been some important things then to hopefully finding that timing and getting it right for what your customers are wanting?
There are some things you can do. You can, of course, bring them into a heated space and then grow things that have take shorter to develop. There's always perennials too, like peonies that are a great seasonal early spring flower. So just trying to find flowers and processes that will generate flowers and grow flowers during the time that people really want them.
What's your favorite flower to grow and why?
I would say my favorite flower to grow is a ranunculus. And it looks like a rose. It's a very early blooming flower, and it has excellent base life, and people love it. So it's something that is definitely a specialty flower, and it's been great to bring those to the local market, and people love them.
For people who are maybe thinking about a cut flower business, what are your recommendations?
Yeah, if you're considering, just understand that start small, which I did in my first season. It was a very small amount and had a couple of different ways that I would market the flowers, and then really hone in on, what works well for you and what you have time for, basically, because it's definitely can be as big or as small as you want it to be.
How have you expanded over the past few years?
So over the past few years, I've added a lot of perennials, more peonies, and added a couple hoop houses, and then have everything pretty much on an irrigation system because you need to have, water. And with the droughts that we're seeing, it's important to have those things in place to better improve the quality of the flowers.
Sara, do you have to deal with pests in your flowers, or is that something you struggle with?
It's part of it comes along with the climate and the weather. And yeah, there's definitely pests that you have to take care of and be on the lookout for and just manage those. So soil health is also part of that, and understanding what is going to give you the best soil and how you can manage that from year to year.
When we think about the cut flower business, what makes you excited for the future?
One of the things that is exciting is that there's continued interest in agriculture experiences, and that's exciting. You see a lot of U-picks, popping up in different states, not just our state, but in different states. And new varieties are always being developed, and new hybrids are coming out. So that's always exciting to see what new is coming to the market.
If people want to find out more information about Bella Ren Fields, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can find out information on my website, bellarenfields.com. You're welcome to sign up for a newsletter. That's one of the best ways to find out what's going on kind of behind the scenes before you might find out about it on social media channels. We are on Facebook and Instagram as well.
Sara, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks, Shelby. It was great to be here.
That was someone involved in agriculture in Dickinson County, Sara Olberding. I will place the links that she mentioned in today's show notes on agtoday.net. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.